Hello, and welcome to the Steve and Mark Discuss podcast, where in a slightly changed format, I'm going to bring up a subject, and Steve has the opportunity to react to what I say. Okay, so there is more of a cultural reference here about where I come from, the UK, or England, or Britain, but yeah, we'll stick with England, regionalist at the moment. And it's about a certain character who may or may not have existed in English history called King Arthur. Now, I've been seeing about a supposedly or an amateur historian called Alan Wilson who died earlier this year. I've seen him prop up on a few occasions throughout the years, who happens to come from Wales and has an interest in medieval history, i.e. doing tabletop research about it, in effect. Yes, reading books and going around looking at manuscripts. I mean, he made his money in shipping and things like this and logistics. I've read about him, and just happened to do this with a couple of other people, written a few books about the subject in history. They have actually sold quite well, offering sometimes alternative views. His name's Alan Wilson. There are a couple of interviews with him available in various parts of the internet and certain streaming channels. Again, not always accepted in the mainstream, although he's made his research available for free to people should they wish to agree or debunk it. He's actually complained that a lot of mainstream historians think he may have some merit in some of his claims, but a bit scared to actually openly say it in case they get cancelled in effect. This was before cancelling became a thing. He said that himself. I don't know how true all that is. Anyway, he's made a couple of claims. One of them is there may have been two King Arthurs, which actually, from my understanding, might not seem so incredible. Now, when we look at history, we argue about what happened last year or 3 years ago. So obviously, things or events that are written down 5, even 50 years after the event are considered contemporary, near contemporary, and a lifetime is considered near contemporary in some historical contexts and archaeological contexts. But yeah, he's read documents, he has documents, he's collected things. Yeah, you know, if you collect them together, he may have merit in what he's saying, given his collection of evidence and interpretation, given that there are certain books that people look at as a guide to their life that have been collected or done in a similar manner. So anyway, he's done this. Now, he claims there are two Arthurs. And again, this isn't been totally debunked by some historians, although historians only said one Arthur. One might have been just at the end of the Saxon period, the Roman period occupation of England, where there was a Roman general called Artaeus, who was going around with a band of people, possibly a local warlord, possibly a local leader, protecting people, or possibly, being a bit of a gangster, who would know? But he was regarded as a king. And apparently there's a bloodline that he may have that comes up later. Another Arthur may have appeared later in Wales, funny enough. And this guy, Alan Wilson, he wants a big statue to Arthur erected there because he said it'd be a good tourist, or he said at the time it'd be a good tourist attraction for Wales, over an Arthur. He may have fought against the Saxon invasion at the time, understanding how Europe operated. Saxon tribes were coming over to England. This was before Vikings paid us a visit. So something happened between the English people sometime and Welsh people sometime between the end of the Roman occupation and, if you like, the Saxons getting a stronghold. And I know about this because there's no evidence, or they can't find where these people went or what happened to them. In effect, was it genocide? Did they just assimilate, or did they disappear off to somewhere else? This is sort of a big question as well anyway. So obviously we've got some scope for discussion here. So again, and he said, which is probably more likely the time of Arthur fighting against an incursion into the UK, or into England at the time. The UK didn't exist then. Into England at the time, a Welsh hero who would have been considered English to all intents and purposes. The idea of Welsh in English is a relatively new concept from what I understand. It existed in Roman times with Druids and people, but it's still, the English and the Welsh have always been united in one way or another. Or at the time. So yeah, he'd have been fighting the Saxons invading. But again, there's no real evidence. There's circumstantial documentation about this. Now, historians question the existence of any Arthur. I'm English. You don't need to tell me that Arthur didn't exist. I know Arthur existed. And I happen to know that should England ever be threatened with another invasion again, that Arthur will rise up with Excalibur and defend us. Okay. Now, the other thing is, there's lots of myths around Arthur. One of them is that he pulled a sword out of a stone. Again, with history, it's interpretation, or people want to fancify it. The reality is that there may have been a stone altar which would have had the sword laid across it, and like we would put today's world, put a crown on someone. It probably the symbol of actually accepting that you're king or a leader would have been to pick the sword up from the stone altar and raise it above your head and wave it. The idea of a sword coming out of a lake, there was always a tradition, given the deities that these people worshipped, that they used to throw ornamental swords or well-made swords into lakes as offerings to the gods. So that may have been where that came from. It may be that somebody did one years ago. This is me doing some speculating, and somebody found a sword. That looks a good sword. We'll use that as our emblem of being a king and lay it on the altar for some guy to pick up later. Anyway, again, this is how history develops. This is how folklore develops. And again, and I'm using this as an example because I'm hearing a lot of non-factual history or non-provable history being bantered around about the Middle East by both sides there, while they're entitled to the land and their histories and everything else. And to be quite honest, it doesn't always ring true. And yeah, we can look at ancient figures in our histories, latch onto them like I've just done with Arthur, who I'd like to really find one day that did exist, to go, yes, that's it, the smoking gun that existed, which would be a wonderful thing, to debunk a lot of what the historians believe. But anyway, over to Steve. Make of that what you will. I'm not quite sure what I've just said, but please make something of it.
Well, I don't think there's anything else more to say, is there? I think you've said it just about everything there is to say about it. I think the central question is, or should be, independent of wandering off into realms of fantasy and all this, is did King Arthur exist or not? It's simple as that. What evidence is that he did? It's a nice story. It's a nice story, quite detailed in some parts. Other people, famous characters, Lancelot, Guinevere, Merlin.
Yeah.
What were their rules? What were their roles within this clan of characters? It would be nice if it was true. It would be nice if it could be proven, but it's one of those enigmas that it's never going to be 100%.
No. And
so, do you treat it as a fact or fiction? you know, and it's really difficult. You're walking on a, like I said, it's a lovely story, and
Mm,
I'm sure there are an awful lot of people would want it to be true,
mm,
especially in Wales,
yeah,
because actually Arthur was Welsh. He
yeah,
wasn't English; he was Welsh.
mm,
Uh, and you know, for them, you know, it'd be nice if they could have like a King Arthur on their crest instead of a daffodil. You know,
I can still put one there. Nothing's stopping them. You can do anything. Yeah,
right? Well, you know, they thought it wiser to put a daffodil on
yeah.
there as a national emblem. But yeah, you know, if he's the sword coming out of the lake,
Mm,
that was the Lady of the Lake, I believe,
yeah, yeah,
that held it aloft, and she appeared above the waters of the lake. You know, I mean, it's like Jesus walking across the Sea of Galilee. You know, it's another story. Did he do it? Did he not? Was he helped? You know, and the same thing could be asked about her. You know,
yeah. I mean, this
well,
is yeah, faith and religion. Yeah,
who was she? You know, and you're at a certain time where witches, for
mm,
example,
mm,
witches were still being burned at the stake.
mm. Well,
When you
yeah.
really look down to it, uh,
I don't know.
witches are they were
Well,
they were just herbalists. There weren't anything else other
no,
than that.
no. I
They
mean,
were herbalists.
I don't think they. I don't think it was then. There was a period of it that came a bit later,
Oh, there was.
which
Who do you think
possibly.
Merlin was? Who do you
Yeah,
think
but
Merlin was?
Merlin was a wizard. I mean, there
Yes,
was a
of
time
course.
when Christianity and more pagan
Paganism.
paganism were
Yeah.
coexisting side by side,
Yes, they were.
um, and you couldn't
That's
suddenly
why the
change.
witches were being burnt.
Well, I think it was
That's why the
just
witches were being burnt, sir.
yeah, yeah. I think people played it every both ways there, a bit like we do with some Brazilians
Well,
do with
you know,
Christianity and Candomblé here. It's they play it both ways. Um,
well,
it
I've not seen anybody being burnt for being a candomblé
No, no, I'm sorry, but yeah, people at the
worshipper.
time,
You
yeah,
know, at that time, it was more serious than what it is here.
yeah.
You know, there was when
Well,
people their belief system
I think,
was a lot more acute.
yeah.
Let's-
I think that was the start of Christianity, and I think there's acceptance that the old religions were going to die unless you go hard fist on it. I think, yeah, probably 16th, 17th centuries is when the real witch burning actually started, probably as early as the 14th. Um, yeah, people would accuse each other of doing things. I mean, warlocks, and yeah, Merlin was
Yeah,
possible.
of course.
Yeah,
You know,
I think at the time there's an acceptance of the mystical side of things. I mean, I'm a Catholic. I can say this. There is a lot of
if you
mysticism in what I believe. Yeah. So
if you see anything related to
mm,
uh, King Arthur,
yeah.
it's all shrouded in mysticism.
Well, yeah. It's
You know,
well, of course it is.
so unless they've taken something out of one time
Yeah.
slot
Yeah.
and slapped it into another
That's
just
poss-
just
that's.
for the mysticism.
I think that's probably what has actually happened. There were probably
Well,
local people. It's again, yeah, it's the point I'm making about history. The point I'm making is about how history can be interpreted, used as propaganda. I mean, Arthur, Arthur was a great English leader who may or may not have existed. I don't know about you, but I wasn't taught at school that he was fake. Till about the age of 11 or 12, I thought he was real.
we did a play at school
Yeah,
called Pedragon.
yeah,
Pedragon it means leader.
yeah,
Uh, the word means leader.
yeah,
Um, yeah, you know, I mean,
yeah. I mean,
I,
one of
I
my
was going to
favorite.
go off. I was going to go off on a tangent, but I thought no, I
No,
won't.
no, no. I mean, one of my favorite all-time films is the film Excalibur, by a John Borman film that was filmed in the 80s. Yeah, actually Irish. Actually, in that, John Terry played an Irish actor played Arthur with the Irish accents. Filmed in Ireland as well, I may add. Had Dame Helen Mirren in it as well in her younger days. Um,
I'm just glad that the guy who did all the research managed to sell some books and at least at least earn a few bob from that.
well, actually, I think he actually enjoyed being a bit of the victim or a bit of the yeah, the
Yeah.
outsider on it all. But I mean,
It's not about him, it's about King Arthur.
yeah, well,
Let's
that's it.
focus,
I mean,
focus on that.
yeah, it is it's a great story. They know about it in Brazil because I've had students ask me, was King Arthur real?" I said, "Well, as an Englishman, I'd tell you yes. As a pragmatist, I would tell you probably not in the sense that we know." I mean, there's some history. Now, obviously, this Alan Wilson, he's also done the classic thing about the chalice. It's buried somewhere in England, and as is the
Yeah.
Ark of the Covenant.
If you England
Yeah,
is full, it's full of
yeah,
folklore
yeah, of course, yeah,
and stories. If you want a good cross section of what country life is like in the UK,
mm,
traditional country life, really
mm,
traditional country life, then you'd have to go back to the 1970s when Jethro Tull
yeah,
released uh, their LP, yeah?
yeah,
Songs from the Wood,
yes, yeah,
because that touches on so many aspects of folklore
mm,
and things that supposedly happened way back in the day.
yeah.
You know, um,
Well,
hey,
it's like we've got
it's a it's a reflection of life. It's a
yeah.
reflection.
I mean, we've got Christian churches that have effigies of depictions of the Green Man in them. That
Yeah,
which is, which was, as I said, it was a crossover at the time, acceptance. Yeah, people are still going to believe this. We'll bring it into the new religion, as it were. Um, and like you say, yeah, what's a miracle? Miracle of life is the ultimate miracle that
yeah,
we all got to remember. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. Obviously, I've done
it
it as
is.
a little bit of a light-hearted thing because of things happening in the world at the moment. That I found, I just saw this guy. He's a bit of an old English eccentric, like I say, and I've always liked the tales of King Arthur, the death of Arthur, as the book was, the one to do Arthur,
Mm.
and um, other, like I said, other films and depictions. Um, I just hope Hollywood doesn't manage to ruin it at some time in the near future.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.